Hey there, and welcome back. Tonight, we step behind a door few ever see, the one that seals the Sistine Chapel from the world. Beyond it lies a ritual wrapped in silence, cloaked in tradition, and pulsing with quiet power. They say the Holy Spirit chooses the Pope, but history suggests something more complicated and far more human. This isn't just about religion. It's about what happens when faith, fear, ambition, and secrecy all share the same sacred space, where red robes can hide rivalries, and prayer doesn't always silence politics. If you enjoy these quiet journeys through the deeper corners of history, feel free to like and subscribe, but only if it feels right to you. And drop a comment letting me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is on your side of the world. I love seeing the way we connect in these still hours. Now dim the lights. Let the quiet settle in. Because tonight, we're entering a room where the world waits, and history holds its breath. The air outside the Sistine Chapel hangs heavy, not with incense, not yet, but with breath. The kind of breath held by 1 billion people who know what is about to happen and yet understand none of it. Inside, there is only silence. Outside, an entire world waits beneath camera towers and waving flags. But the moment that heavy wooden door swings shut, time does something strange. It stops, and it deepens. The world is cut off, and a ritual older than most nations begins again. This is not just ceremony. It is seclusion. From this moment forward, no one enters, no one leaves. The electors inside are not allowed newspapers, phones, or whispers from the outside. They are locked in, quite literally, to discern a future no one else may touch. It is an old tradition, one born from both reverence and necessity. But it is not immune to power. The College of Cardinals has gathered like this for centuries, in scarlet robes and white skull caps, to cast secret ballots in the name of divine guidance. But many of them arrive, knowing precisely whom they will vote for and why. The conclave was not always this controlled. The word itself comes from the Latin cum clave, with a key. It implies confinement, yes, but also urgency. It was born not out of piety, but out of exasperation. In 1268, after Pope Clement IV died, cardinals convened in Viterbo, a small town in central Italy, to elect his successor, but the process dragged on for nearly 3 years. Roman nobles, French clerics, and regional bishops each backed their own candidate. No consensus emerged, so the local authorities in Viterbo, furious with the delay, took matters into their own hands. They locked the cardinals inside the palace, removed the roof to expose them to the weather, and reduced their meals to bread and water. The message was clear: choose or suffer. Only then did the cardinals elect Pope Gregory X in 1271. And from that misery, the system of papal conclave as we know it began to take shape. When the papal throne is empty, the Vatican becomes the most watched place on earth. News cameras line St. Peter's Square, reporters whisper urgent speculations, and pilgrims arrive from every continent just to see a chimney. It is an odd focal point for global attention, a small pipe on the roof of the Sistine Chapel, but it becomes the only clue the outside world has. Black smoke means no decision. White smoke means a new pope has been chosen. But what most people don't realize is how much of the process remains unseen, how much happens in silence, in subtle gestures, in deeply human negotiations disguised as sacred routine. The Vatican keeps the rules tight. Since 1996, under Pope John Paul II's Apostolic Constitution, Universi Dominici Gregis, the rules governing conclaves have been detailed and strict. Secrecy is paramount. Every cardinal elector takes an oath under pain of automatic excommunication. The ballots are counted by hand, burned after each round, and if the results are inconclusive, more rounds follow twice in the morning, twice in the afternoon until a name rises to the required 2/3 majority. The ritual itself is breathtaking in its symbolism. The cardinals process into the Sistine Chapel singing the Litany of the Saints. They take their seats beneath Michelangelo's ceiling, where Adam reaches toward God and the Last Judgment looms behind the altar. Then the Master of Ceremonies proclaims Extra Omnisevery One out. Only the electors remain. The doors close, and silence descends. But within that silence are dozens of inner dialogues. Every man inside knows what his vote will mean. Some have already made promises. Some carry the hopes of entire theological movements or national blocs. Others arrive burdened with fear of what a new pope might say, reveal, or undo. While the world outside watches for smoke, the real signals are exchanged eye to eye, in glances, in a nod, in the subtle weight of history pressing down on each man's conscience. The white smoke, when it comes, will rise like a symbol of unity. But the road to that moment is rarely so clean. The system we now call the Papal Conclave was born not from divine vision, but from human frustration. Before the 13th century, papal elections were chaotic, open-ended affairs with no strict time limits and few procedural safeguards. Rival factions within the College of Cardinals would argue, delay, and maneuver for months or even years. Political interference from European monarchs, Roman noble families, and powerful ecclesiastical blocs often paralyzed the process. It wasn't until the crisis in Viterbo, after the death of Pope Clement IV in 1268, that something had to break. The city's leaders, furious that the cardinals were taking years to elect a new pontiff, took unprecedented action. They locked the cardinals inside the episcopal palace and removed the roof to expose them to the elements. They fed them bread, water, and wine and waited. The conditions were harsh, humiliating, and effective. After nearly 3 years, the cardinals finally elected a compromise candidate, Theobald Visconti, who became Pope Gregory X in 1271. That experience scarred the Church's memory and inspired reform. In 1274, Pope Gregory X issued the Constitution Ubi Periculum at the Second Council of Lyon, formally establishing the rules for papal conclave. The cardinals were to be locked in, cut off from the outside world, and required to reach a decision with speed and spiritual clarity. Meals would be reduced progressively in later days of the conclave to encourage haste. No communication with outsiders was permitted, and all deliberations were to be kept strictly confidential. The structure was designed to prevent manipulation and encourage genuine discernment, but it also acknowledged a truth the Church had come to accept reluctantly. Even the holiest of men could be swayed by ambition, politics, or fear. Conclave was not just about invoking the Holy Spirit. It was about limiting the worst instincts of human nature, while still trusting that, somehow, God might still speak through flawed men. Over the centuries, the rules have been revised most recently in 1996, but the heart of the system remains the same. Lock the doors, let the world wait, and hope something sacred survives the struggle. To the outside observer, the papal conclave appears as a holy ceremony, wrapped in incense and Latin chant, watched over by saints painted into the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. But inside, it is something far more conflicted. The cardinals who enter that space do so not as blank vessels of divine will, but as human beings shaped by years of ambition, compromise, theological loyalty, and political debt. Many have spent decades navigating Vatican corridors of influence. Some have built entire ecclesiastical careers through silence, favor, and allegiance. Others have weathered scandal and now hope the next pope will shield, rather than expose what they carry. The conclave is not a monastery. It is a battlefield made quiet by rules. And though the ballots may be secret, the strategies are anything but invisible. There are whispers exchanged during meals, eyes watching reactions during liturgy, and mental tallies made with every nod or silence. The robes may be crimson, but underneath them, some carry swords made of memory and fear. The conclave's spiritual ideal that the Holy Spirit alone guides the election is one the Church holds dear. But throughout history, even popes have admitted the complexity of what really happens behind closed doors. Pope John Paul II once said that the Holy Spirit does not dictate a name, but rather offers inspiration, which can be accepted or ignored. This is a key distinction. The cardinals vote as free men. They may pray, reflect, and seek divine guidance, but no angel whispers in their ear, and many arrive having already decided whom they will not support. Personal loyalties, national interests, theological divides, all of these shape the votes. In that sense, the conclave is less about discovering God's will and more about navigating a storm of human desires while trying not to lose sight of grace. There have been elections decided in only a few rounds, and others that dragged on for days. Some outcomes shocked the world. Others were seen coming from miles away. But every time the doors close, the same question lingers in the minds of many watching. Will this be a moment of faither, a triumph of politics wearing liturgical lace? Within the conclave, every cardinal dresses the same: scarlet robes, white zucchettos, gold crucifixes resting on aging chests. From a distance, it looks like unity. But unity is an illusion carefully choreographed by centuries of tradition. In reality, the conclave is mapped by lines invisible to the eye, but deeply felt by every man present. These are the power blocks, the alliances, and loyalties that stretch across language, geography, ideology, and memory. Some blocks are national, like the Italian group, long dominant in church affairs. Others are theological, such as the reformists who seek a more open church, and the traditionalists who believe in doctrinal firmness and liturgical precision. These alignments are not accidental. They are cultivated years in advance. Bishops promoted under one papacy tend to reflect the vision of the pope who elevated them. As a result, Every conclave contains remnants of the past and seeds of the future. The election is not just about the next pope. It is a reckoning between legacies. Even before the doors of the Sistine Chapel are sealed, the blocks begin moving. Private dinners in Roman apartments, quiet conversations at synods, friendly visits during international trips. These are the arenas where influence is negotiated and names begin to circulate. While the rules of conclave forbid outright campaigning, there is no rule against familiarity. And in the Vatican, familiarity is its own form of currency. A nod from a respected cardinal, a mention at the right moment, a sense that one man could hold together a fractured church. These things matter more than eloquence or age. The block leaders, often known as kingmakers, rarely expect to wear the white cassock themselves. Their influence lies in uniting just enough support to block an opponent or tip the scale toward a compromise. No vote is cast in a vacuum. Each one echoes with history, loyalty, and calculation. When ballots are burned and smoke rises, the public sees a symbol. But the cardinals inside know that the real map of the conclave is drawn long before the first puff of white curls into the Roman sky. The world marks the beginning of the conclave when the doors of the Sistine Chapel close. But by then, the game is already well underway. The most important moves happen before a single ballot is cast, before the procession of crimson robes, before the first prayer echoes through the marble hall. This pre-conclave period is where the strategies take shape. In the months, sometimes years, leading up to a papal election, cardinals engage in quiet diplomacy. They travel, they meet, they speak in guarded tones about the future of the church. These encounters may seem Bennig lunches between old friends, meetings of bishops at global synods, shared moments during liturgical events, but behind the formality lies the subtle maneuvering of influence. A suggestion made over wine, a name dropped in passing, a shared concern about the direction of doctrine or discipline. These are the first tremors of the earthquake to come. By the time the cardinals gather in Rome following a pope's death or resignation, most of them have a short list in their minds. And while the rules prohibit formal campaigning, the art of suggestion is alive and well. Some cardinals make their case not by promoting themselves, but by projecting humility, presenting themselves as too old, too quiet, too regional, while their supporters build quiet consensus. Others act as shepherds for specific causes, the defenders of orthodoxy, the champions of the poor, the advocates of dialogue with other faiths. These identities become rallying points. In the days between the general congregations and the conclave itself, conversations intensify. Hints are exchanged in elevators, at dinners, even in brief moments during prayers. No cell phones are needed. Influence moves through presence, familiarity, and memory. The Sistine Chapel may be the stage, but the real drama begins in parlors and guest houses. By the time the door closes behind them, many cardinals already know not just whom they will vote for, but whom they absolutely will not. The ballots may be secret, but the preferences have been shaped long before anyone writes a name. When the cardinals enter the Sistine Chapel, they appear as a unified body, bound by tradition, liturgy, and a common faith. But beneath the polished silence lies a quiet war, one not fought with swords or public proclamations, but with calculation, memory, and quiet determination. These are men who have spent decades navigating the hierarchy of the Church, building influence through diocesan leadership, curial assignments, or theological allegiance. They carry with them not only the hopes of those who appointed them, but also their own vision for what the Church must become or must not become. Each scarlet robe represents a nation, a community, an ideology. Some favor continuity, others hunger for reform. And a few walk in with deep wounds, determined to prevent certain names from ever ascending to the throne of Peter. The first votes are rarely decisive. They are feelers, signals sent through ballot boxes to gauge strength, test alliances, and identify threats. But even these early rounds can expose rifts that have been hidden under layers of liturgical protocol. The tension is not always visible. It hums just beneath the hymns, rests in the silence between prayers, and glows behind the eyes of men who know this is likely the most consequential decision of their lives. The rules are clear. Ballots are to be marked by hand, read aloud, counted by designated scrutineers, and then burned. But the intent behind each vote is often more complicated than the vote itself. Some ballots are cast for a friend, others are cast to test loyalty. A few are thrown deliberately to mislead, to disguise a strategy or buy time. And when a candidate receives a surge of support, it may not be a show of confidence, but a warning to his opponents. The red robes make them look the same. But inside the conclave, each man is his own nation, his own archive of grudges and hopes. The wars they fight here are quiet, but their consequences will echo for generations. And they all know, to win is rare. To prevent someone else from winning is sometimes the real goal. Not every cardinal enters the conclave expecting to become pope. In fact, most know they never will. But some of these men, the so-called kingmakers, hold more sway than any papabile ever could. They are the ones whose voices are quiet, but whose reach is long. Their strength lies not in popularity, but in memory. These are men who have built coalitions over decades, through appointments, shared causes, theological symphonies, and bureaucratic loyalty. They are trusted, not because they seek power, but because they know how to move it. When the ballots begin to fall, their hands are not idle. They offer counsel in subtle moments. They nudge conversations without ever seeming to steer them. They know which name will split a block and which name will unify just enough to cross the threshold. Their candidate may not be anyone's first choice, but they are often everyone's second and, in conclave arithmetic, that can make all the difference. These kingmakers are rarely mentioned in the news. Their names don't circulate in early speculation, but their fingerprints are often all over the final outcome. They serve as bridges between factions respected by both traditionalists and reformers, known to moderates, feared by those who carry secrets. Their genius lies in identifying what the church needs or believes it needs, and finding a man who can become that symbol. Sometimes their choice is a man of compromise, sometimes a radical, but never someone they have not already mapped. They begin their work well before the conclave, in conversations too casual to be called campaigns. They draw out hesitations, soothe anxieties, and plant seeds of confidence. Then, inside the chapel, they let the process appear organic. Their influence is not coercion, it is gravity. Other cardinals orbit around them, seeking clarity or safety. When the white smoke finally rises, the world sees a pope. But the kingmakers? They see the result of 100 conversations, glances, favors, and decisions made far from the altar. And they walk away, quietly, having changed the future without ever stepping into its spotlight. Every conclave begins with a prayer. Before the first vote is cast, the cardinals call upon the Holy Spirit to guide their minds and hearts. It is a moment of solemn beauty, where centuries of tradition meet the fragile hope that divinity still speaks through men. But history tells a more layered story one, where grace and realpolitik exist side by side, often in tension. The Church teaches that the Pope is chosen under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, yet the very existence of elections, oaths, scrutiny, and multiple rounds of balloting suggests that something more human is always at work. If the Holy Spirit were to choose directly, why then the need for locked doors, secret negotiations, and procedural rules? The truth may lie not in opposition, but in coexistence. That the Spirit whispers but men do not always listen, and sometimes, even when they do, they hear what they want to hear. There have been moments in history where the outcome of a conclave appears divinely inspired. Popes who rose unexpectedly and led the Church with humility, courage, or reform. But just as often, there are examples of popes who emerged from political compromise, dynastic maneuvering, or raw ecclesiastical calculation. Consider the Renaissance period, when wealthy families such as the Medicis shaped conclaves with influence and gold. Or more recently, when ideological factions within the College of Cardinals backed candidates not because of sanctity, but because of doctrinal alignment. Pope Francis himself acknowledged this tension in 2019, saying that it is not the Holy Spirit who names the Pope, in a mechanical sense, but rather the Spirit inspires, leaving men free to respond or not. This freedom is both beautiful and dangerous. It opens the possibility for grace to enter, but also for fear, ambition, and self-preservation to cloud judgment. Realpolitik. The art of what is politically possible operates in the conclave as it does in any high council. The stakes are too high for it not to. Yet within this murky process, faith remains. Because sometimes, despite all the calculation, something unexpected happens. A choice is made that no bloc predicted, no strategy allowed. And in those moments, even the skeptics wonder if the Spirit still breathes through the cracks of human power. For centuries, the papal conclave has been regarded as a sacred space, a realm where divine will is sought in the absence of worldly influence. But history is full of reminders that the outside world has not always respected that boundary. Before the modern rules of secrecy and independence were firmly established, kings, emperors, and secular governments routinely interfered in papal elections, sometimes openly, sometimes with devastating subtlety. One of the most infamous examples came in 1903 during the conclave held after the death of Pope Leo XIII. The leading candidate was Cardinal Mariano Rampolla, a former Secretary of State and respected figure within the Curia. But, as the votes began to consolidate around him, Cardinal Jan Puzina of Krakow stood up and delivered an astonishing message. In the name of Emperor Franz Joseph I of Austria, Hungary, he vetoed Rampolla's candidacy. It was the last known instance of a secular power exercising the Jews' exclusivity right of exclusion. The impact was immediate and humiliating. While the veto held no canonical authority, it cast a shadow over Rampola's electability. Cardinals, fearing political consequences or institutional embarrassment, quickly shifted their votes. Rampola's momentum vanished, and Giuseppe Sarto was elected instead. He became Pope Pius X and soon issued a constitution banning any future attempts at interference, declaring that any cardinal who even transmitted a secular veto would be excommunicated. It was a necessary reform, but it came only after centuries of meddling. During the medieval and early modern periods, the Holy Roman Empire, the Spanish crown, and the French monarchy all sought to shape the papacy for their own interests. Sometimes they succeeded. At other times, their involvement prolonged conclaves or sowed lasting divisions within the Church. Even after formal vetoes were forbidden, subtle forms of pressure persisted. Concordats, diplomatic appointments, and unofficial messages continued to shape preferences within the College of Cardinals. The conclave may now be sealed from the outside world, but it has never been immune to its echoes. And in moments of crisis or ideological struggle, the temptation to influence from beyond the Vatican walls has never truly disappeared. The longest papal election in history began in 1268 and dragged on for nearly 3 years, paralyzing the Church and testing the patience of an entire city. When Pope Clement IV died in November of that year, the cardinals gathered in Viterbo, a hill town north of Rome, to choose his successor, but they could not agree. The college was deeply divided between pro-French and pro-Italian factions, with no single candidate able to secure the necessary majority. At the time, there were no formal conclave rules, no seclusion mandates, and no procedures to force a timely decision. So the cardinals lingered. Seasons passed. Tensions deepened. Meanwhile, the papacy remained vacant, and Christendom grew restless. Without a pope, no bishops could be appointed, no disputes settled, no direction given to a church that stretched across Europe. The paralysis became a crisis not just of leadership, but of credibility. Eventually, the people of Viterbo lost their patience. Led by the city's magistrates, they took drastic and symbolic action. They locked the cardinals inside the episcopal palace and refused to let them leave. They cut off all but the most basic provisions: bread, water, and occasional wine, and even removed the roof of the building to expose the electors to rain, wind, and sun. This was not cruelty for its own sake, but a civic act of desperation. The Church needed a pope, and the cardinals were failing their duty. After nearly 3 years of deadlock, the pressure finally worked. In September 1271, the exhausted cardinals elected Theobald Visconti, a non-cardinal who was then in the Holy Land on crusade. He accepted the papacy and took the name Gregory X. His first priority was to ensure that such a delay would never happen again. At the Second Council of Lyon in 1274, he introduced ubi periculum, which laid the foundation for the modern conclave seclusion, progressive meal restrictions, and the barring of outside interference. It was a turning point. From that moment, conclave would be about urgency as much as spirituality. The Viterbo lock-in became legend, a reminder that even the holiest systems need the push of reality to reform. In the history of the papal conclave, few moments have so clearly revealed the clash between spiritual authority and secular power as the 1903 veto of Cardinal Mariano Rampolla. It was the last gasp of a centuries-old tradition known as the jus exclusivatha, so-called right of exclusion. This practice allowed certain Catholic monarchs, namely the kings of Spain and France and the Holy Roman Emperor, to block a specific candidate from becoming pope by delivering a formal objection during the conclave. Though not codified by church law, this veto was acknowledged through political custom and reluctantly accepted by the College of Cardinals. It was an uncomfortable compromise between the Church's claim to divine independence and the political realities of Europe's monarchies. In 1903, those two worlds collided in dramatic fashion. Rampolla, a longtime Vatican insider and respected diplomat, had gathered significant support early in the conclave. But the Austro-Hungarian Emperor, Franz Joseph I, saw him as too progressive and hostile to imperial interests. Cardinal John Puzaina, Bishop of Krakow, rose during the voting sessions and, to the shock of many, announced the emperor's veto. It was a moment of humiliation not just for Rampolla, but for the conclave itself. Although many cardinals viewed the veto as a disgraceful intrusion, its effect was immediate. Rampolla's support crumbled, and the momentum shifted toward Cardinal Giuseppe Sarto, who was elected pope shortly afterward, taking the name Pius X. One of his first acts as pope was to abolish the practice entirely. He declared that any cardinal who received, communicated, or acknowledged a secular veto would be subject to automatic excommunication. With that decree, the age of monarchic interference in papal elections came to an official end. But the deeper question lingered. Had the conclave truly escaped the reach of politics, or had the nature of influence simply changed its costume? The veto may have been outlawed, but the instinct behind it, the desire of powerful entities to shape the Church's leadership, did not vanish. It merely evolved, shifting from royal thrones to quieter, more modern corridors of pressure. When the heavy doors of the Sistine Chapel close, the world sees only stillness. Cameras freeze on brick and stone. Reporters pause. Bells quiet. But within the chapel, beneath the vault of Michelangelo's final judgment, there is motion that no one sees. It is not physical, it is emotional, psychological, spiritual. Each cardinal seated in that chamber is carrying more than a vote. They carry alliances, wounds, loyalties, and questions. They know the rules. No phones, no messages, no outside world. But silence does not mean peace. There is restlessness in that stillness, an interior debate within each man. The Church teaches that the Holy Spirit will guide them, but the cardinals know that the Spirit does not shout. If he speaks, it is in the quiet of the soul, competing with the echoes of politics, memory, and fear. The silence of the conclave is sacred, but it is also heavy, because each man must search not only for a leader, but for honesty within himself. Some cardinals pray more than they vote. Others write names with trembling hands. Some try to remain neutral, but neutrality is its own form of decision. In the early rounds, ballots are scattered. No clear frontrunner, no consensus. But these are not wasted votes. They are signals. They show who has support, who is gaining ground, and who cannot win. The room may be silent, but messages are everywhere. A glance at the ballot counters, a furrowed brow when a name is read aloud, a shared look between two electors who know what just shifted. These gestures say what words cannot. The stillness becomes a kind of code, understood only by those inside. The prayers continue, but so do the calculations. Each new vote reshapes the landscape, narrowing the possibilities. The silence deepens, not as absence, but as weight. It presses down with every round, with every name whispered in prayer or written with quiet resolve. By the time the smoke rises, black or white something will have changed. But for now, the world watches an unmoving door, while inside, a storm brews in complete stillness. There is a phrase often whispered among Vatican officials, never written down but always understood. Not all enemies wear different robes. Within the conclave, betrayal does not arrive as a dramatic outburst. It comes quietly, under the weight of trust once given. Every cardinal who enters that room has a history, some shared, some hidden. Old alliances forged in Rome's curial halls, friendships made at synods or missionary work abroad, whispered promises from years past. But once the conclave begins, those loyalties are tested. In a chamber where every vote is anonymous, where every gesture must be read in silence, betrayal becomes not only possible, it becomes inevitable. Some men pledge their support for a candidate only to pivot when the momentum changes. Others signal neutrality, then act as saboteurs when the moment arrives. And a few, sensing that their own past might soon catch up to them, work to destroy any name that might expose them once elected. This is not treachery in the conventional sense. It is a kind of chess, where loyalty is fluid and memory is selective. The papacy is not just a spiritual office, it is an axis of power, one that shapes doctrine, appointments, global influence, and the future of billions. To control it, or at least influence who holds it, is worth the risk of burning a bridge or breaking a vow. Some cardinals walk into the conclave with clear intent to block one man, no matter the cost. Others act out of fear of reform, of exposure, of accountability. The betrayal may be as subtle as voting differently than promised. It may be as bold as spreading doubt about a candidate's health, past, or politics. Once trust is broken, the effects ripple across ballots like a crack in stone. In public, the cardinals will kneel together, chant together, pray together. But behind the masks of reverence, old friends become rivals, and whispered assurances turn to silence. This is the paradox of the conclave. It is built on faith but survives through strategy. And in a room where the next pope waits among them, even saints may be tempted to betray. History often turns on moments so quiet they might be missed entirely, yet their effects echo through the ages. In the papal conclave, such moments are whispered, almost secret, exchanged in a glance or a half-spoken phrase during breaks in prayer. It is here that alliances solidify and fractures deepen, long before ballots are cast or smoke rises from the chimney. The delicate balance between competing factions can hinge on a single word, a gentle nod, or the subtle indication of a shared cause. These whispered conversations are the invisible thread weaving through the tapestry of the election, binding some and excluding others. They may appear insignificant to an outsider, but to the cardinals they are signals, promises, and warnings. One whispered word can tip a stalemate, awaken support for a forgotten candidate, or crush a rising star. The power of these whispers lies in their intimacy. In a conclave that prohibits campaigning or public endorsements, the quiet word carries weight far beyond a public speech. It is trusted because it is private. It is persuasive because it respects the confidentiality sacred to the conclave. History offers examples where such moments changed everything. During the 1958 conclave that elected Pope John XXIII, many cardinals were searching for a compromise candidate, someone who could heal divisions and lead with humility. Quietly, some began to speak of Angelo Giuseppe Roncalli, a man considered too old and obscure to be a serious contender. Yet these whispers spread, growing into consensus, surprising many when he was ultimately elected. The whisper did not just change votes, it shifted the direction of the Church itself. This delicate interplay between silence and speech, power and persuasion, remains at the heart of the conclave's mystery. Beneath the grandeur and ritual, it is a story of human connection whispered in shadow, shaping the course of history in moments no one else hears. Though the conclave's doors are locked tight, the process does not unfold in isolation. Behind the scenes, far beyond the stone walls of the Sistine Chapel, a host of unseen influencers work tirelessly to shape the outcome. They are not cardinals and hold no vote, yet their presence is deeply felt within the corridors of Vatican power. Diplomats, ambassadors, retired prelates, and trusted confidants carry messages, gauge opinions, and build quiet momentum. These ghostly figures operate in a shadowy world of discreet dinners, private letters, and secret meetings. Their role is not to dictate, but to inform, counsel, and at times, pressure. They feed hopes and fears, relay concerns about global politics, church doctrine, or potential scandals, and bring voices from far corners of the Catholic world into the heart of the election. Though excluded from the formal process, they are indispensable conduits of influence. In modern times, this web of unofficial actors has expanded to include intelligence agencies and governments, reflecting the geopolitical importance of the papacy. During the Cold War, for instance, it is well documented that both Eastern and Western powers sought to sway conclaves to favor candidates who would align with their interests. The election of Pope John Paul II, a Pole who openly opposed communism, was more than a religious event. It was a geopolitical turning point. But even aside from governments, within the Church itself, advisors who once held high office but are now retired often serve as mentors to younger cardinals. Their opinions carry weight in informal gatherings and behind closed doors. In this way, the conclave is less a solitary chamber than the center of a vast, unseen network of voices, some whispered, some insistent, all shaping the moment when the world awaits the signal of white smoke. During the Cold War, the papacy was far more than a spiritual institution. It was a geopolitical actor with influence stretching across East and West. Intelligence agencies recognized this and paid close attention to the conclaves that would elect leaders capable of shaping global politics. The election of Karol Wojtyła as Pope John Paul II in 1978 is a prime example. A Polish cardinal, deeply rooted in a nation behind the Iron Curtain, Wojtyła was seen as a figure whose charisma and convictions could inspire resistance against communist regimes. It is now known through declassified documents and scholarly research that Western intelligence agencies, including the CIA, monitored the conclave and the subsequent papal election closely. They sought to understand which candidates might align with their interests, and at times discreetly influence outcomes through unofficial channels. The Cold War was a time when religious belief and political ideology intertwined tightly. Pope John Paul II's election sent ripples through Eastern Europe and beyond, energizing dissident movements and challenging Soviet authority in ways few had anticipated. His moral authority and global outreach became a powerful counterweight to communist ideology. While the Vatican has always insisted on the spiritual independence of the papacy, the reality wasn't is that the Church operates within a complex web of global power dynamics. Intelligence agencies viewed the conclave not only as a religious event, but as a strategic moment where the future of political alliances and ideological struggles could be shaped. This intersection of faith and espionage reveals the conclave as a unique space where divine aspirations meet the tangled realities of worldly power. The election of Karol Józef Wojtyła as Pope John Paul II in October 1978 was unprecedented in many ways. He was the first non-Italian pope in 455 years and the first ever from Eastern Europe. His election surprised many within the Vatican hierarchy, particularly the powerful Italian faction long accustomed to dominating the papal office. But beyond the Church, his election carried enormous geopolitical significance. Poland was under communist rule, tightly controlled by the Soviet Union, and Wojtyła was a figure who had already demonstrated courage in the face of oppression, a leader who could inspire hope among millions living under regimes that sought to suppress religion and dissent. His election was viewed by many as a quiet yet profound act of resistance against the communist bloc, sending shockwaves through both religious and political circles. John Paul II quickly became more than a spiritual leader. He became a symbol of freedom and resilience. His visits to Poland emboldened the Solidarity movement, a labor union that grew into a powerful social force demanding political reform. The Pope's steadfast opposition to communism, combined with his moral authority, helped galvanize international support for the cause of human rights behind the Iron Curtain. Within the Vatican, his election also marked a subtle shift in power. While many cardinals had expected a continuation of traditional policies, Wojtyła brought a new energy that challenged established curial dynamics. The conclave that elected him reflected not only religious considerations, but also the geopolitical tensions of the era. It was a turning point where the spiritual and the political collided, forever altering the course of both church and world history. The papal conclave is a carefully choreographed ritual designed to evoke awe and mystery while protecting the secrecy that surrounds its proceedings. Every detail from the cardinal electors' procession into the Sistine Chapel to the oath they take to the way the ballots are handled serves a purpose beyond the surface. This theater of ritual ensures that the process appears unified and holy, even as beneath the surface, tensions simmer and alliances shift. The conclave begins with solemn prayers, including the Litany of the Saints, asking for divine guidance. After the Master of Ceremonies pronounces extra omnisol, others must leave the cardinals enter a state of strict seclusion. The doors are locked, symbolizing the complete separation from the outside world. This seclusion is a physical reminder of the spiritual nature of the election, but it also enforces the confidentiality necessary to protect the cardinals and the institution from external pressures. The ballots themselves are crafted with care. Each cardinal receives a small paper on which to write the name of his chosen candidate. After voting, the ballots are collected, counted, read aloud, and then burned. The burning is not merely practical, it is symbolic. The smoke rising from the chimney is the only signal the outside world receives. Black smoke means no decision. White smoke means a pope has been chosen. The ceremony also contains numerous symbolic gestures, such as the ringing of the chapel bells after each ballot count, and the prohibition of any communication between cardinals and outsiders. These rituals reinforce the sanctity and solemnity of the process, cloaking it in centuries of tradition. Yet, within this carefully maintained theater, human frailty and political strategy coexist. The conclave's ritual is as much about creating a sacred space as it is about masking the realities of human ambition. When a cardinal receives his ballot in the conclave, he holds more than a small piece of paper. He holds a responsibility that weighs heavily on his conscience and the future of the Church. Each name written represents not just a vote, but a hope, a fear, and a prayer. The act of casting a ballot is both simple and profound simple in its physical motion, profound in its consequences. Cardinals are instructed to write the name clearly, fold the paper, and deposit it into the chalice before the altar. This moment is intensely private, yet carries the collective weight of history, tradition, and expectation. The burden rests not only on choosing the right man, but on acknowledging the gravity of the decision for Catholics worldwide. The process is designed to ensure fairness and secrecy. After all ballots are collected, they are counted meticulously by scrutineers chosen among the electors. Names are read aloud slowly to ensure accuracy, each tally carefully recorded. If no candidate achieves the 2/3 majority required, the ballots are burned with a special chemical to produce black smoke, signaling to the outside world that no decision has been reached. When a candidate does reach the necessary votes, the ballots are burned again, this time producing white smoke, announcing that a new pope has been elected. Despite the procedure's simplicity, the weight of expectation on each vote is immense. Each cardinal knows that the person he chooses will lead over 1 billion souls, guide global Catholic doctrine, and shape the Church's relationship with the modern world. The ballot is a physical reminder of this Burdina silent pledge made in the shadow of the divine, but grounded in human responsibility. Inside the Sistine Chapel, every vote cast is a quiet act of balancing faith and pragmatism. Cardinals do not enter the conclave as blank slates, waiting solely on divine guidance. Instead, each man is acutely aware that his decision carries weighty consequences not only for the Church's spiritual direction, but also for its political stability and survival. The tension between voting with pure conviction and voting with strategic caution is a defining feature of the election. Many cardinals pray for clarity, hoping to discern the true will of the Holy Spirit. Yet at the same time, they navigate an intricate web of alliances, past grievances, and future expectations. To choose the wrong pope, in their eyes, could mean fracturing the Church, alienating entire regions, or sparking internal conflict that might outlast the new pontiff's reign. The struggle between faith and survival is a human drama played out on a sacred stage. Some cardinals enter the conclave determined to elect a reformer who can open the Church to the modern world and address pressing social issues. Others push for a conservative candidate who will safeguard tradition and doctrinal purity. The reality is that these opposing visions often mirror broader cultural and political divides within Catholicism itself. Voting becomes an act of negotiation, a way to protect the Church's unity while advancing particular theological priorities. For many electors, the choice is not ideal, but necessary a compromise, born from the hope that even imperfect leadership can guide the Church through turbulent times. It is a reminder that the Conclave is as much a human institution as a divine one, shaped by the complexities of belief, ambition, and responsibility. Before the cardinals ever gather behind the locked doors of the Sistine Chapel, the conclave's most decisive moments often occur in quiet, private spaces across Rome. These are the pre-conclave negotiations in formal meetings, whispered conversations, and discreet gatherings where alliances are formed and broken long before any votes are cast. Though the conclave itself prohibits campaigning or canvassing for votes, no rule forbids the softer, more subtle work of persuasion that happens outside official chambers. In the months leading up to a papal election, cardinals meet for dinners in private residences, discuss potential candidates in closed circles, and exchange assessments of the Church's needs and the qualities required of its next leader. These encounters can be casual or charged, but they all serve the same purpose: to build consensus and minimize surprises once the conclave begins. These behind-the-scenes maneuvers shape the atmosphere inside the chapel more than many realize. A cardinal's influence often depends as much on his network and the promises he can secure in advance as on his theological credentials or pastoral experience. The pre-conclave period is a delicate dance of trust and caution, as cardinals must balance loyalty to their preferred candidates with the need to accommodate other factions. Some candidates emerge as early favorites, only to be quietly sidelined through these informal negotiations. Others gain momentum by winning over key allies, or assuring detractors that their vision will not threaten core Church traditions. Though the conclave is designed to be secret and sacred, the political currents flowing beneath the surface are very real, and they begin to shape the election's outcome long before the doors close. The history of the papacy is not without its dark chapters, and those shadows sometimes reach even into the conclave. While the election of a pope is ideally a sacred and pure process, the men who enter the Sistine Chapel bring with them the full weight of their lives, both public and private. Scandals, whether personal or institutional, have the power to influence votes in subtle but powerful ways. Cardinals under suspicion or involved in controversies may find themselves isolated, their candidacies quietly dismissed. Others may fear that a new pope could expose past wrongdoings or lead reforms that threaten their positions. These fears create an undercurrent of anxiety within the conclave, shaping alliances and blocking certain names from rising. The weight of potential scandal adds a layer of caution and calculation that tempers faith with survival instinct. Throughout history, there have been instances where allegations of corruption, nepotism, or moral failings cast a pall over papal elections. Some cardinals have faced whispers about financial improprieties or political entanglements. Others carried burdens related to theological disputes or their handling of church crises. The prospect that a newly elected pope might demand accountability or reform can be both a deterrent and a motivator. It encourages some electors to support candidates perceived as safe or status quo, rather than reformers who might threaten entrenched interests. While the Church seeks to uphold sanctity, the conclave is a human gathering, and human flaws inevitably influence outcomes. Scandal's shadow is a reminder that the papal election is as much about preserving the institution as it is about choosing its spiritual leader. Throughout the history of the Church, periods of reform have often followed moments of crisis or stagnation. Within the conclave, reformers represent the voices calling for change, renewal, and openness. These cardinals seek to address the challenges facing the Church, whether theological, social, or institutional, and advocate for a vision that embraces modernization and dialogue with the wider world. Their rise is not always welcomed by all. Many within the College of Cardinals prefer continuity and caution, wary of changes that might unsettle tradition or doctrine. The election of a reformer can spark hope among the faithful, but also provoke resistance within the Vatican's corridors of power. The tension between reform and tradition is a recurring theme in papal elections, reflecting broader struggles within Catholicism itself. Reform-minded cardinals often face uphill battles. They must convince colleagues not only of their personal virtues, but also of the necessity of change. These men are sometimes painted as radicals or disruptors, labels that carry heavy weight in a church that values stability and orthodoxy. However, reformers have shaped the church's history profoundly. Pope John XXIII, elected in 1958 as a transitional figure, surprised many by calling the Second Vatican Council, which transformed Catholic worship, ecumenism, and relations with the modern world. His election showed that even a conclave rooted in tradition can produce unexpected results. Yet, reform is rarely swift or uncontested. It is a process that unfolds over years, often with setbacks and compromises. Within the conclave, reformers must navigate these complexities carefully, balancing ideals with the realities of church politics. Their rise embodies the Church's ongoing struggle to reconcile faithfulness to its past with the demands of a changing world. When white smoke rises above the Sistine Chapel, the world sees a single figure, the new Pope. But behind that moment lies a complex tapestry of men whose names may never be widely known outside Vatican circles. The papabilith candidates considered likely or suitable for the papacy often become the focus of speculation. Yet, many who actually receive votes come from unexpected places or rise through quiet paths. Some are seasoned curial officials. Others are influential archbishops from far-flung dioceses. Their journeys to the conclave are marked by a blend of pastoral work, theological scholarship, and political navigation. The faces behind the smoke represent the Church's global diversity and the intricate balancing act of regional, ideological, and cultural interests that the College of Cardinals must weigh. These men bring different perspectives, shaped by their histories and environments. A cardinal from Latin America may prioritize social justice and poverty alleviation, while one from Europe might emphasize doctrinal conservatism or church tradition. African and Asian cardinals bring voices from rapidly growing Catholic populations, advocating for a church attuned to new cultural realities. Their votes reflect not only personal conviction, but the hopes of millions who look to them for leadership. Sometimes, a papabile emerges. Unexpectedly, someone previously overlooked who gains momentum through quiet consensus or shifting alliances. Other times, a candidate's election surprises even the cardinals themselves, reflecting the conclave's unpredictable nature. The white smoke signals a choice that balances faith, politics, and hope. But behind it, the many faces remind us that the papacy is not about one man alone, but about the global church striving to find direction in an uncertain world. The term papabile is one that captures the imagination of observers and insiders alike. It refers to the cardinals considered likely or suitable to become pope, the supposed frontrunners whose names circulate in Vatican corridors, media speculation, and whispered conversations. However, the notion of a papabile is often more illusion than reality. While some cardinals genuinely emerge as strong contenders due to their experience, influence, or personal charisma, many more never reach the necessary support to succeed. In fact, the conclave has a long history of surprising outcomes where unexpected candidates rise and supposed favorites fall. The label papabile can sometimes become a double-edged sword. Being seen as a frontrunner can attract both support and opposition, making the path to the papacy more treacherous. Cardinals aware of their papabile status often face added scrutiny and pressure. Some intentionally downplay their prospects, presenting themselves as humble servants rather than ambitious contenders. Others embrace the attention but risk alienating key voters. The conclave is not a straightforward election, but a complex negotiation involving theological convictions, regional loyalties, and strategic calculations. Many cardinals receive votes simply as expressions of hope or protest rather than genuine endorsement. The story of Pope John the 23rd, elected in 1958, exemplifies this unpredictability. Considered a compromise candidate and not a papabile in the traditional sense, Angelo Roncalli's unexpected election showed that conclaves can defy expectations. This unpredictability keeps the conclave shrouded in mystery and suspense. The papabile label, while useful for observers, often conceals the deeper dynamics of power, persuasion, and prayer that truly shape the election. The election of Pope John the 23rd in 1958 was a moment that surprised many and ultimately changed the trajectory of the Catholic Church. Known then as Angelo Giuseppe Roncalli, he was seen as a caretaker, Popian, elderly, mild-mannered cardinal, unlikely to make sweeping changes. Few outside the Vatican anticipated that this transitional pope would become a transformative figure. His election came after a prolonged conclave marked by deadlock and uncertainty, where cardinals sought a unifying presence to bridge factions. Roncalli's humility and pastoral approach made him an appealing compromise. Yet, the true impact of his papacy emerged soon after, when he called the Second Vatican Council in 1962. This council brought unprecedented reforms in liturgy, ecumenism, and church engagement with the modern world. John 23's election reminds us that the conclave is never purely predictable. Sometimes the cardinals choose not the expected candidate, but one who reflects a deeper need for renewal. His papacy ushered in a new era, emphasizing dialogue and openness, shaking centuries-old traditions, and inviting the Church to rethink its role globally. The white smoke that rose that October was not only a sign of a new pope, but a symbol of transformation. The election showed that while politics and strategy shape the conclave, faith and hope remain powerful forces. It is a testament to the conclave's mystery that an unlikely man can become a beacon for millions, and that history can turn on a vote cast in the silence of the Sistine Chapel. When Pope John XXIII convened the Second Vatican Council in 1962, it sent shockwaves through the Catholic world. Few anticipated such a dramatic turn. The council was intended to address the Church's relationship with a rapidly changing modern world, but its implications extended far beyond that. It transformed liturgical practices, promoted ecumenical dialogue with other Christian denominations and religions, and encouraged a renewed focus on the laity's role in the Church. The decisions made at Vatican II redefined Catholicism's self-understanding and opened new channels for engagement with culture and politics. Yet, none of this would have been possible without the unexpected election of John XXIII, whose vision and humility ignited a movement for renewal from within. The Council's impact is still felt today, shaping debates on doctrine, morality, and church governance. For many cardinals in the conclave that elected John XXIII, his call for Vatican II was surprising, even unsettling. Some saw it as a break with tradition, while others embraced it as necessary reform. The Council revealed how a single conclave vote could redirect centuries of history and influence millions of faithful around the globe. It also underscored the delicate balance within the conclave between continuity and change. Though conclaves are steeped in ritual and history, the men inside are responsive to the signs of their time. Vatican II remains a testament to the conclave's ability to elect leaders who reflect not only the Church's past, but its evolving future. Though the papal conclave operates under strict legal codes, there are countless unwritten customs and traditions that shape its proceedings. These informal rules govern behavior, speech, and strategy in ways the official documents cannot fully capture. For centuries, cardinals have understood that beyond the prayers and ballots, much depends on subtlety, discretion, and respect for the solemnity of the moment. For example, campaigning is forbidden, but behind closed doors, delicate conversations and gentle persuasion are the norm. Similarly, while secrecy is mandatory, leaks and rumors often emerge, reflecting the impossibility of absolute silence. These unwritten norms create a complex etiquette that every elector must navigate with care. One important but unofficial rule is the concept of acclamatio, where a pope can be elected by unanimous voice rather than ballot, although this method has not been used since the Middle Ages. Another tradition is the avoidance of public displays of ambition. Cardinals who are seen as too eager risk alienating peers. The conclave also respects seniority and age, with older cardinals sometimes deferring to younger colleagues to ensure a balanced choice. These customs maintain order and dignity, but also conceal the maneuvering beneath. In the conclave, what is said openly is only part of the story. What remains unsaid can be even more powerful. Understanding these unwritten rules reveals how conclave is as much a game of subtlety and restraint as it is a solemn election, a reflection of the Church's centuries-old efforts to blend faith with human nature's complexities. Though the formal right of veto, the jus exclusivae, was abolished in 1904 by Pope Pius X, the influence of unofficial vetoes has lingered in the shadows of conclaves since then. These so-called ghost vetoes operate through subtler means than the blunt declarations of past centuries. but their effect can be equally decisive. Rather than a direct rejection by a secular power, these modern vetoes might come in the form of behind-the-scenes pressure, whispered warnings, or strategic withdrawals of support. They reflect the ongoing tension between the conclave's spiritual ideals and the realities of church politics, where powerful factions seek to block candidates deemed unsuitable for doctrinal, political, or personal reasons. For example, in the 1958 conclave that elected Pope John XXIII, there were rumors that certain cardinals opposed his election for being too progressive, working to suppress his momentum through quiet persuasion rather than open confrontation. Similarly, during the 2013 conclave that elected Pope Francis, reports emerged of intense lobbying and factional negotiations aimed at influencing the outcome, with some candidates facing covert opposition that shaped the final vote. These ghost vetoes underscore the conclave's complex dynamics. No candidate is ever elected solely on merit or prayer alone. Influence, alliances, fears, and strategic calculations all play roles. While the Vatican guards the conclave's secrecy zealously, the reality is that the process remains as political and human as it is sacred. Understanding ghost vetoes reveals how power continues to flow beneath the surface of one of Christianity's most revered rituals. The conclave of 2005 was one of the most anticipated in recent history, following the death of Pope John Paul II, whose long and influential pontificate had reshaped the Church and the world. Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger, the then prefect of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, was widely considered the frontrunner. Known for his theological conservatism and close association with John Paul II, Ratzinger carried significant support from the Curia and traditionalist factions. Yet, despite his apparent dominance, the conclave was far from unanimous. Resistance within the College of Cardinals reflected deeper tensions between progressives and conservatives, moderates and hardliners. The election was a delicate balancing act, one in which the cardinals sought to preserve continuity while addressing the Church's need for renewal. When white smoke rose on April 19, 2005, announcing the election of Pope Benedict XVI, many outside observers saw a foregone conclusion. However, the months and years that followed revealed how complex the election had been. Behind the closed doors of the Sistine Chapel, cardinals engaged in intense debate and negotiation. Some feared that Ratzinger's election would solidify a conservative hold that might alienate the Church's growing global population, while others welcomed his firm stance on doctrine. His election represented a compromise of sorts between maintaining tradition and acknowledging the need for dialogue. Benedict XVI's subsequent papacy grappled with these tensions, balancing orthodoxy with pastoral care. The 2005 conclave serves as a reminder that even seemingly inevitable outcomes in the Vatican result from careful, often fraught deliberation, where faith and politics intertwine in profound ways. The 2013 conclave followed an unprecedented event: the resignation of Pope Benedict XVI, the first papal resignation in nearly 6 centuries. This opened the door for a conclave steeped in uncertainty and opportunity. Among the candidates was Jorge Mario Bergoglio, the Archbishop of Buenos Aires and a member of the Jesuit order. Initially considered a long shot, Bergoglio's election as Pope Francis surprised many inside and outside the Vatican. His humble demeanor, focus on poverty and social justice, and reputation as a reformer distinguished him from more traditional candidates. His election reflected a desire among many cardinals to bring new energy and direction to the Church at a time of crisis and change. Pope Francis's rise was not just a spiritual decision, but also a strategic one. The Conclave sought a leader who could address the Church's scandals, engage with a diverse global flock, and navigate the complex relationship between tradition and modernity. His Jesuit background emphasized education, discernment, and a commitment to the marginalized values that resonated with cardinals seeking renewal. However, his election also reflected the growing influence of non-European voices within the College of Cardinals, mirroring the Church's demographic shifts. The 2013 Conclave demonstrated that while the Vatican remains steeped in tradition, it is also responsive to the world's evolving realities. The white smoke that day announced not just a new pope, but a new chapter for Catholicism itself. For every pope elected, there are dozens of cardinals who enter the conclave with hopes, but leave with disappointment. These men may be seasoned diplomats, influential bishops, or respected theologians whose candidacies never gain the necessary momentum. Losing a conclave can carry personal and political consequences within the Vatican's intricate hierarchy. Some cardinals retreat into quieter roles, their ambitions dimmed, but their influence still felt behind the scenes. Others carry the loss as a lasting mark, affecting their standing with peers and shaping their future involvement in church affairs. The process is unforgiving, and the margin between election and exclusion is often razor thin. The stories of these men remind us that the conclave is not just about the winner, but about the complex interplay of faith, politics, and human frailty. Some who lose may be victims of factional rivalries or shifting alliances. Others find themselves sidelined by concerns about health, ideology, or past controversies. Yet, even in loss, many continue to serve the Church with dedication, recognizing that the role of a cardinal is not solely to aspire to the papacy, but to shepherd the faithful. Their silent presence shapes the Church's path in ways that are less visible but no less significant. The conclave is a crucible that tests not only who will lead, but who will endure. In this endurance lies the ongoing story of Catholic leadership. The conclave is often portrayed as a sacred moment, a gathering where the Holy Spirit guides men of faith to choose the next leader of the Catholic Church. Yet, beneath this spiritual veneer lies a complex reality, where ambition, compromise, and political maneuvering inevitably play their roles. Voting in the conclave is a deeply human act, shaped not only by prayer but by strategy, loyalty, and sometimes self-preservation. Cardinals bring to the chapel decades of relationships, debts, and rivalries, all of which influence their decisions. While faith may be the professed guide, the process is never free from the messy, imperfect nature of human institutions. Throughout history, there have been instances when votes were cast not for ideal candidates, but for those deemed least objectionable, or for men who promised stability over reform. Some cardinals vote strategically to block rivals or secure influence, aware that their choice will ripple across church politics for years to come. This is not necessarily corruption, but a recognition that the Church is as much a political entity as a spiritual one, The tension between the sacred and the pragmatic defines the conclave's character. It reminds us that while divine guidance may inspire, the ultimate decision rests in the hands of fallible men, whose choices reflect both holiness and human frailty. The white smoke rising may signal unity, but it also conceals the complexity of votes cast in shadow. Every cardinal who enters the conclave carries more than a voting card. He carries the weight of his past. These men come from diverse backgrounds and experiences, some marked by devotion and service, others shadowed by controversy and failure. The Church teaches that the papacy is a sacred office, but the electors themselves are imperfect. Many have faced challenges and scandals, some personal, others institutional. They may carry regrets for decisions made, conflicts endured, or secrets held. This burden shapes their perspectives and often influences their choices during the election. For some, the conclave is a chance for redemption, an opportunity to choose a pope who can heal wounds or bring reform. For others, it is a protective moment, a chance to preserve legacies and prevent upheaval. These hidden sins are rarely discussed openly, yet their presence is felt in the solemn atmosphere of the conclave. Fear of exposure or scandal can lead to cautious voting, protecting certain candidates or blocking others. The Church's history includes popes elected amid controversy and others who sought to reform from within. The knowledge that no candidate is without flaws, tempers, expectations, and complicates decision-making. The conclave becomes a place where forgiveness, judgment, and human frailty intersect. It is a reminder that while the Church aspires to holiness, its leaders are shaped by the complexities of human life. In the silence of the chapel, the sins they carried in whisper alongside prayers for guidance and grace. The conclave's sacred silence often masks the complex interplay of scandal, secrecy, and strategy that influences the election of a pope. Behind the closed doors, cardinals confront not only theological questions but also the shadows cast by recent controversies within the Church. Allegations of financial misconduct, sexual abuse, and political entanglements weigh heavily on the minds of many electors. These issues are rarely addressed openly during the conclave, but they shape conversations, alliances, and votes in profound ways. Some cardinals seek a pope who can confront these scandals head-on, bringing transparency and reform. Others prefer a candidate who will preserve the Church's unity and protect its reputation, even if that means maintaining silence. The tension between these approaches creates a strategic environment where choices are carefully calculated. Supporting a reform-minded candidate may risk fracturing the College of Cardinals or alienating powerful factions. Conversely, electing a pope who prioritizes discretion might delay necessary change but ensure stability. The conclave thus becomes a battleground where ethical imperatives clash with institutional preservation. The strategies employed reflect a deep awareness of the Church's fragile position in a world increasingly skeptical of its authority. This delicate balancing act influences not only the election outcome, but the future direction of the Church itself. While prayer and faith underpin the conclave, scandal and strategy are inseparable elements of its reality. The papal throne is one of the most powerful and symbolically charged seats in the world. It represents spiritual authority, centuries of tradition, and the leadership of 1 billion Catholics. Yet, it is also a seat of immense burden and loneliness. The Pope is expected to be a shepherd, diplomat, and moral compass roles that often conflict and weigh heavily on the individual. Behind the grandeur of ceremonies and the golden chair itself lies the reality of isolation. The Pope faces constant scrutiny, enormous responsibilities, and decisions with global consequences. Despite the majesty surrounding the office, many popes have described the emotional and psychological toll of their position as profound and, at times, overwhelming. The image of the empty papal chair is a powerful reminder of the Church's vulnerability during transitions. When a pope dies or resigns, the chair sits vacant, symbolizing a pause in leadership in a moment of uncertainty. This vacancy places enormous pressure on the cardinals tasked with electing the new pope, knowing that their decision will fill this void with a man who must carry the hopes, fears, and expectations of the faithful. The duality of the papal offices, both a throne of authority and a chair of solitude, reflects the human side of an institution often viewed as divine and unchanging. It is a role that combines power and humility, tradition and adaptation, a constant negotiation between the sacred and the human. Throughout history, there have been moments when papal elections nearly failed to take place, delayed by war, plague, or political turmoil. One of the most striking examples occurred in the early 13th century, when rival factions within the Church and hostile secular powers threatened the very process of electing a new pope. On several occasions, conclaves were postponed or interrupted due to violence in Rome or power struggles that spilled into the Church's own sanctuaries. The death of a pope sometimes led to chaos rather than orderly succession. In the 13th and 14th centuries, the papacy itself moved to Avignon, France, where conclaves were held in exile, highlighting the fragility of the institution amid political pressures. These disruptions challenged the Church's ability to maintain continuity and underscored the vulnerability of the conclave as a human institution. The fear of prolonged vacancies, known as sede vacant motivated reforms, to ensure that elections proceeded swiftly and without interference. The 1274 Constitution, Ubi Periculum, issued by Pope Gregory X, was an attempt to address this by imposing strict rules on conclave proceedings, including seclusion and progressive food rationing. Despite these reforms, emergencies and external crises have occasionally delayed conclaves, forcing cardinals to adapt. For example, during World War II, concerns over safety and communication complicated the conclave held after the death of Pope Pius XII. Though these moments were exceptions, they reveal how deeply intertwined the Church's spiritual processes are with the political and social realities of their time. The conclave's survival depends not only on faith, but on resilience in the face of worldly challenges. In every papal conclave, alongside the names widely discussed and the cardinals openly considered, there exist the so-called phantom candidates, those whose names occasionally surface in whispers or private discussions, but never gain official traction. These candidates may be respected prelates known for their theological expertise, charismatic leaders of emerging Catholic communities, or influential members of the Curia who hold significant sway behind the scenes. Their candidacies are often shaped by factional politics, regional interests, or strategic attempts to test the waters within the College of Cardinals. Though rarely emerging as frontrunners, these phantom candidates reveal the complexity and unpredictability of the conclave process, where support can be fluid and contingent on shifting alliances. Phantom candidates can serve various purposes. They may act as compromise choices when major factions reach deadlock, or be used to signal dissatisfaction with the leading contenders. In some cases, their names gain temporary popularity due to rumors, political calculations, or efforts by kingmakers to broaden the field. Yet, these candidacies often fade quickly as the conclave narrows its focus toward candidates with realistic paths to the papacy. The presence of phantom candidates reflects the human element of the election, a space where hope, ambition, and strategy intertwine. While the faithful watch for white smoke signaling a new pope, the unfolding drama inside the chapel is shaped as much by these shadowy figures as by the familiar names that dominate headlines. Being the front runner in a papal conclave can be as much a curse as a blessing. History shows that the candidates most openly favored by observers, the media, and even fellow cardinals often face the greatest obstacles once the voting begins. Their prominence makes them targets for opposition from competing factions, and their perceived inevitability can breed resentment and strategic alliances aimed at blocking their election. In some cases, frontrunners have withdrawn their candidacies or lost support dramatically during the conclave, replaced by compromise candidates who initially appeared unlikely to succeed. This pattern reflects the conclave's complex dynamics, where consensus and unity are often prized over raw popularity or dominance. The pressures facing frontrunners are intense. They must navigate the delicate balance between demonstrating leadership qualities and avoiding appearing overly ambitious. A cardinal seen as too eager or assertive risks alienating peers who value humility and discretion. Additionally, the theological and ideological divisions within the College of Cardinals mean that frontrunners often face opposition from well-organized blocs determined to preserve their vision of the Church. The phenomenon of the curse underscores the conclave's preference for consensus and caution, emphasizing the spiritual and communal nature of the election over individual ambition. It also serves as a reminder that, despite external perceptions, the election of a pope is a deeply human process, marked by unpredictability and the search for unity amid diversity. In the cloistered silence of the Sistine Chapel, cardinals gather with hope and prayer, seeking guidance from the Holy Spirit. Yet, there are moments when that divine presence seems absent or muted. Throughout history, many have felt that God remains silent during the conclave, leaving men alone to wrestle with their doubts, ambitions, and fears. This silence is not necessarily abandonment, but a profound test of faith. It forces the electors to confront the weight of their responsibility without certainty, relying on prayer, conscience, and reason. The tension between divine silence and human decision-making is a defining feature of the papal election and invitation to humility amid power. This experience of silence has shaped the conclave's spiritual atmosphere. Cardinals often describe moments of intense introspection where the room feels heavy with expectation yet still. They understand that the outcome may be imperfect, reflecting human frailty as much as divine will. The absence of a clear sign compels them to listen more deeply to themselves, to one another, and to the wider Church. It also creates space for unexpected outcomes, where compromise candidates or surprising figures emerge. Silence can be unsettling, but it also reveals the conclave's true nature, a gathering not of prophets or seers, but of fallible men entrusted with an immense responsibility. In that silence, faith is tested and, sometimes, renewed. Inside the Sistine Chapel, as the conclave unfolds, each cardinal faces not only the collective weight of the Church, but also the intensely personal burden of conscience. The decisions they make will influence millions of lives and shape the spiritual direction of Catholicism for years to come. This responsibility presses on them with immense gravity, creating an atmosphere akin to a pressure cooker where faith, doubt, hope, and fear collide. Every vote is more than a political maneuver. It is a profound moral act. Many cardinals enter the conclave grappling with their own doubts, fears of failure, or awareness of the Church's challenges. They must balance loyalty to their own convictions with the need to find common ground, often compromising ideals for the sake of unity. This inner turmoil manifests in moments of silent reflection, whispered prayers, and even tears. Reports throughout history tell of cardinals weeping before casting ballots, seeking forgiveness for their choices or strength to carry the burden. Others wrestle with the tension between personal ambition and spiritual duty, hoping their vote will serve God's will rather than their own desires. The pressure cooker of conscience also fuels the strategic aspects of the conclave. Some votes are cast not for perfect candidates, but for those deemed capable of holding the Church together. The emotional weight of this process shapes the conclave's rhythm, turning it into a deeply human experience where faith struggles alongside politics, and where the search for a new pope becomes a journey of conscience for all involved. The burning of ballots is one of the most evocative rituals of the conclave. After each round of voting, the ballots are collected and placed on a small stove within the Sistine Chapel. The smoke that emerges from the chimney above signals to the outside world whether a pope has been chosen. Black smoke means no decision, while white smoke announces a new pontiff. This ritual is both practical and deeply symbolic. It ensures the secrecy of votes and the integrity of the process, but it also transforms a simple act into a dramatic message watched by millions. The chemistry behind the smoke's color has even evolved to ensure clarity, reflecting the conclave's desire to maintain tradition while adapting to modern communication. The ritual of fire and ash also embodies the tension between concealment and revelation that defines the conclave. The ballots themselves contain the deepest intentions of the electors, yet they are destroyed, erased by flames that both hide and reveal. The transformation of paper to smoke is a metaphor for the transition from uncertainty to decision, from individual votes to collective choice. Throughout the conclave, this ritual repeats, each time building suspense and hope. The people outside wait for the smoke, interpreting its color as a sign from heaven or a signal of continued deliberation. Inside, the cardinals continue their solemn task, aware that each burning ballot brings them closer to an outcome that will shape the Church's future. The period between the death or resignation of a pope and the election of his successor is known as sede vacante, literally, the seat being vacant. These days are marked by a unique blend of solemnity, uncertainty, and anticipation. During this time, the governance of the Church is entrusted to the College of Cardinals in a limited capacity, but no major decisions or appointments may be made. The Church's heartbeat slows as the faithful around the world await the appearance of white smoke signaling new leadership. This interregnum can last from a few days to several weeks, depending on the length of the conclave and any external circumstances affecting the election process. Historically, some sede vacante periods have been peaceful and orderly, while others have been fraught with political tension, rumors, and intrigue. The death of Pope John Paul I in 1978 led to one of the shortest interregnums in modern history, lasting only 33 days before Pope John Paul II was elected. In contrast, earlier centuries saw vacancies extending for months or even years, sometimes causing instability in both church and state. The sede vacante serves as a moment of reflection for the church, a time to mourn a leader and to prepare for new direction. It also reveals the vulnerability of an institution so closely tied to the singular figure of the Pope. As the world waits, the Church holds its breath, knowing that the days without a Pope are both an end and a beginning. When the Conclave convenes and the doors of the Sistine Chapel close, the world watches with bated breath, united in anticipation and curiosity. The global Catholic community, numbering over 1 billion people spread across continents and cultures, along with countless observers from other faith traditions, governments, and secular institutions, fix their collective attention on the Vatican as if the fate of history itself hangs in the balance. The election of a new pope transcends the confines of an internal church matter. It becomes a moment saturated with spiritual resonance, cultural symbolism, and geopolitical consequence. Around St. Peter's Square, cameras and media outlets meticulously capture every movement of the waiting crowd, while newsrooms across the globe sift through rumors, analyze gestures, and speculate on possible outcomes. This intense scrutiny creates a striking paradox. The conclave is enveloped in an almost impenetrable veil of secrecy, yet it unfolds under the vigilant gaze of the entire planet, with eyes both reverent and critical. The weight of this global attention places profound pressure on the cardinals locked inside the chapel. These men, charged with choosing the spiritual leader of millions, are acutely aware that their decision will be judged far beyond the walls of the Vatican, not only by theologians and church officials, but also by politicians, social activists, academics, and ordinary believers spanning every corner of the world. The Pope they elect will shape the Church's response to urgent global challenges: poverty and inequality, human rights crises, environmental stewardship, and interfaith dialogue. The conclave thus becomes a critical crossroads where ancient faith traditions meet the modern world's complex expectations and challenges. Though the process is cloaked in ritual and confidentiality, the decision's reverberations extend well beyond the Vatican, influencing diplomatic relations, cultural conversations, and the daily lives of millions. The eyes of the world serve as a constant reminder to the cardinals that their solemn vote carries consequences, not only for doctrine and dogma, but for the Church's evolving role on the global stage. This responsibility is both humbling and immense, making the conclave one of history's most watched and consequential elections. History often surprises us with leaders who emerge unexpectedly from the shadows to reshape institutions, societies, and entire eras. Such moments of unforeseen leadership can upend expectations, redefine priorities, and leave lasting impacts far beyond what anyone imagined. Within the papal conclave, these surprises are especially rare, given the complex web of alliances, traditions, and politics that influence the election of a pope. Yet when they do occur, they carry profound significance, altering not only the course of the Catholic Church but also its relationship with the wider world. One of the most striking examples is the election of Pope John XXIII in 1958. At 76 years old, Angelo Giuseppe Roncalli was widely regarded as a transitional figure, a caretaker pope, who would serve briefly until a more decisive or politically acceptable election could be made. Few expected this elderly cardinal, considered by many as a placeholder, to leave a mark that would echo through the 20th century and beyond. Roncalli's election was, in many ways, a surprise not only to the outside world but to the cardinals themselves. What followed was a papacy that dramatically altered the direction of the Church. His calling of the Second Vatican Council initiated sweeping reforms in worship, doctrine, and the Church's engagement with modern society and other faiths. The Council's decisions reshaped Catholicism's liturgical practices, ecumenical outreach, and theological outlook, influencing millions of believers worldwide. Pope John XXIII's legacy reminds us that conclaves, while steeped in politics and factionalism, can transcend human calculations and manifest moments of true spiritual renewal. His election was a testament to the unpredictability and mystery inherent in the process. Similarly, other conclaves have produced unexpected popesmen who emerged not as frontrunners but as compromise candidates, capable of bridging divides and calming internal tensions. These popes may not have been the most powerful or popular figures prior to their election, yet they often inspire trust and hope at critical junctures. Their leadership challenges entrenched hierarchies and opens new pathways for the Church, demonstrating its capacity for growth and adaptation. This phenomenon underscores the interplay between human agency and divine inspiration in the conclave, where outcomes defy prediction and invite reflection on the deeper workings of faith. Such leaders remind the faithful and the broader world that the Church is a living, evolving institution capable of renewal and surprise precisely when it is least expected. The papacy, often idealized as a purely spiritual office standing above worldly conflicts, has throughout history been a vibrant and turbulent battleground where ideological, political, and personal struggles converge with intense passion. From the medieval period, through the Renaissance and Reformation, and into the modern era, the position of Pope has drawn fierce competition from factions within the Church itself, as well as interest groups outside it. Cardinals entering the conclave carry not only the weight of their spiritual responsibilities, but also represent diverse theological perspectives, national interests, and competing ecclesiastical agendas. These conflicting loyalties transform the election of a pope into a contest that is as much about power, influence, and survival as it is about faith and divine guidance. In this way, the conclave acts as a microcosm of the broader tensions that shape Catholicism and its relationship with the changing world around it. The papal office's battlefield nature does not end with the election. Once the white smoke rises and a new pope is announced, he steps into a role fraught with complex challenges and opposition from multiple quarters. Within the Vatican Curia, the bureaucracy that governs the Church's day-to-day affairs, entrenched interests, and established hierarchies can resist reforms or new directions proposed by the Pope. Beyond the Curia, bishops and regional church leaders may disagree with papal decisions, and in some cases, entire nations react strongly to the Pope's stances on social, political, or moral issues. The Pope must balance spiritual leadership with political savvy, acting as both a religious guide and a diplomatic figure navigating a global institution with deep historical roots. Throughout history, popes have had to lead amidst wars, schisms, ideological upheavals, and social revolutions, often using their office as a platform for peace-building and political maneuvering alike. Understanding the papacy as a contested battlefield sheds light on the immense challenges every pope faces and reveals the complex interplay of forces, faith, politics, ambition, and tradition that continuously shape the Church's course. It reminds us that the papal throne is not just a seat of religious authority, but a contested arena where the forces of belief and worldly power collide in profound and often unpredictable ways. When white smoke billows from the chimney of the Sistine Chapel, it is a signal of profound significance, announcing the election of a new pope. For the tens of thousands gathered in St. Peter's Square and the millions watching from every corner of the globe, this moment ignites waves of joy, relief, and celebration. It marks the Church's decision to entrust its leadership to one man, a successor to St. Peter, who will guide over 1 billion faithful through the spiritual and temporal challenges of the coming years. Yet behind the jubilant cries and the waving flags lies a hidden reality, a web of secrets, calculated decisions, and delicate compromises that remain concealed from public view. The white smoke itself becomes a powerful symbol, not merely of divine approval, but of the complex and often opaque human processes that lead to this outcome. Each puff of smoke carries the weight of countless votes cast in silence, alliances both forged and broken in whispered conversations, and a precarious balance of power meticulously maintained behind the chapel's locked doors. These secrets are guarded with utmost rigor. The cardinals swear solemn oaths of secrecy before entering the conclave, vowing to preserve the confidentiality of their deliberations under penalty of excommunication. The rituals of seclusion, including the locking of doors and the destruction of ballots after each round of voting, serve to protect the election's sanctity and shield it from external interference. However, history reveals that even the strictest silence cannot fully contain human curiosity or ambition. Whispers, rumors, and leaks have occasionally escaped the conclave's shadows, offering tantalizing glimpses into the intrigues within. Some of these secrets pertain to the candidates' backgrounds, controversies, or personal histories, while others concern the political negotiations, promises, and strategic deals made away from public eyes. The white smoke veils these layers of intrigue, transforming what is at once a profoundly political and deeply spiritual process into a moment charged with mystery and awe. For believers, the rising smoke symbolizes hope, faith, and the guiding hand of the Holy Spirit. For historians, journalists, and Vatican insiders, it represents a veil behind which the human dramas of power, ambition, and diplomacy unfold in ways both subtle and dramatic. Appreciating the secrets hidden in the smoke invites a deeper understanding of the conclave merely as a time-honored ritual, but as a complex human event where faith and strategy are inextricably entwined. It reminds us that the election of a pope is as much about the divine as it is about the very human realities of leadership, negotiation, and the enduring struggle to balance sacred tradition with the demands of an evolving world. The idea of corruption within the papal conclave is deeply unsettling, yet it is a reality that has shadowed the process at various points throughout history. While the conclave is designed as a sacred and secretive assembly, governed by strict rules intended to insulate it from external influence and preserve its integrity, the complexities of human nature and institutional power mean that no system is entirely immune to flaws. Over the centuries, there have been numerous allegations and instances of undue influence, favoritism, and even outright bribery affecting the election of popes. The medieval and Renaissance periods, in particular, saw widespread accusations of Simonite buying and selling of ecclesiastical offices and political machinations within the conclave that shaped papal outcomes. While outright corruption has been relatively rare and often condemned by church authorities, the potential for pressure, behind-the-scenes bargaining, and alliance building has always been present, complicating the idealized image of a purely spiritual election. In the modern era, the Church has sought to address these vulnerabilities through extensive regulations and reforms. Conclaves are now heavily supervised, with rigorous procedures to enforce secrecy and fairness, and strict penalties imposed for any breaches of confidentiality or attempts at manipulation. The cardinals take solemn oaths to uphold these standards, underscoring the gravity of their responsibilities. Nevertheless, critics and historians argue that influence still operates in subtler ways. Personal alliances, ideological factions, and geopolitical considerations continue to shape voting patterns and candidate viability. The delicate challenge for the Church lies in balancing the need for transparency and accountability with the requirement of confidentiality, ensuring that the election remains free from undue external pressures, while respecting the privacy essential to candid deliberation. This balance is critical to maintaining the conclave's legitimacy in the eyes of the faithful and the world. The history of corruption and political interference in papal elections serves as a cautionary tale, reminding us that the election of a pope is not solely a spiritual act, but also a profoundly human one, shaped by the complexities, ambitions, and imperfections of those who participate. This recognition encourages ongoing vigilance and reform to safeguard the conclave's sacred mission, ensuring that while human frailty is acknowledged, the process strives to reflect divine guidance and the Church's highest ideals. Understanding these risks deepens our appreciation for the conclave's challenges and highlights the importance of transparency, integrity, and faithfulness in one of Christianity's most consequential rituals. In the hushed, marble-lined corridors of the Vatican, where centuries of history and tradition converge, discretion is more than a virtue. Is a form of currency that can determine the course of the Church's future. Within this sacred space, the election of a pope unfolds as a delicate dance of silence and subtlety. Throughout history, there have been pivotal moments when a cardinal's misstep, speaking too openly or revealing intentions, prematurely has disrupted the fragile equilibrium that the conclave depends upon. These breaches of silence, though relatively rare given the high stakes and solemn oaths, have the potential to unsettle long-standing alliances and shift the momentum of the election in profound ways. The conclave thrives on confidentiality and mutual trust, and a whispered comment, an offhand remark, or a leaked hint can quickly provoke suspicion, sow discord, or trigger strategic realignment among the electors. A cardinal who speaks too soon may find himself isolated, vulnerable to manipulation, or worse, turned into a pawn in the political games played by rivals eager to undermine his credibility and influence. These instances reveal the conclave's intricate and fragile balance between openness and secretia paradox at the heart of its proceedings. While the Church upholds prayer, spiritual discernment, and divine guidance as the foundation of the papal election, the process is undeniably a contest of human wills, ambitions, and power dynamics. The weight of expectation on the cardinals is immense. They are not only making a decision that will shape the Church for years, but also navigating a labyrinth of competing interests and loyalties. The pressure to maintain silence and decorum is therefore enormous, yet the intensity of the moment sometimes pushes cardinals to express their hopes, frustrations, or concerns before the time is right. These premature disclosures can reverberate far beyond the immediate moment, influencing not only the outcome of the election, but also altering the internal relationships and power structures within the College of Cardinals, long after the white smoke signals a decision. The cardinal who speaks too soon becomes a cautionary figure, emblematic of the risks inherent in the conclave's secretive world. His words, intended or not, may be weaponized by opponents seeking advantage, or they may inadvertently fracture fragile coalitions. Such episodes remind all participants that in the conclave, discretion is as vital as devotion, and silence often carries more weight than any spoken word. The ability to listen, to observe, and to withhold judgment until the right moment is a form of spiritual and political wisdom cultivated over centuries. It underscores the conclave's unique nature not simply as a ritual of faith, but as a complex human event where every gesture, every word, and every pause can carry consequences that echo through the history of the Church. The conclave is designed as a sealed chamber of prayer and secrecy, a sacred space where the College of Cardinals can deliberate without distraction or external influence. Yet, in today's interconnected world, the desire of the outside world to peer inside has reached unprecedented levels. Advances in technology, the ubiquity of social media, and the rise of 24-hour global news cycles have created a landscape where every whisper, every gesture, and every subtle sign surrounding the election of a pope is intensely scrutinized. Journalists camp outside St. Peter's Square, eager to capture even the faintest clue. Intelligence agencies monitor movements and conversations, and countless curious onlookers attempt to decode the complex signals emanating from Vatican City. The conclave, once shielded by centuries of tradition and isolation, now faces a new challenge: how to preserve its sanctity and confidentiality amid a relentless global gaze. To meet this challenge, the Vatican goes to extraordinary lengths to protect the conclave's secrecy. Strict communication bans are rigorously enforced, ensuring that cardinals and staff cannot send or receive messages during the election process. Access to the Vatican is tightly controlled, with layers of security designed to prevent unauthorized entry or surveillance. Electronic devices are forbidden, and the media are kept at a distance, allowed only to report from designated areas far from the conclave's chambers. Despite these measures, speculation and rumor inevitably flourish outside the chapel walls. Leaked information, unofficial statements from insiders, and public interpretations of every movement and expression seen in St. Peter's Square feed a constant stream of conjecture. The media narrative often blends fact and fiction, amplifying the mystery and anticipation that surround the election. Over the decades, concerns have surfaced regarding electronic surveillance, insider leaks, and diplomatic pressures exerted through covert channels. While no verified evidence suggests that modern spying technologies have compromised the integrity of the voting process itself, the Church remains vigilant. The threat of intrusion, whether through technological means or human error, looms over the conclave, compelling the Vatican to maintain ever-tightening security protocols. This vigilance reflects a broader recognition of the conclave's unique role, a process that must remain free from external pressures, allowing the cardinals to discern their decision in prayerful solitude. The intense global interest in the conclave underscores its significance beyond the confines of religious ceremony. It is a moment that resonates politically, culturally, and spiritually around the world. As millions watch and listen from afar, the Vatican's efforts to preserve silence serve as a reminder that some decisions, particularly those of profound spiritual magnitude, require a sanctuary removed from the noise and influence of the outside world. The conclave stands as a rare instance where faith seeks to assert itself in an age dominated by information and transparency. This tension between secrecy and scrutiny continues to define the modern papal election, highlighting the challenge of balancing tradition with the realities of contemporary life. Ultimately, the conclave's enduring mystery invites us to respect the boundaries between public fascination and sacred deliberation, recognizing that some moments are meant to unfold in quiet reverence rather than public spectacle. While the Pope undoubtedly holds immense authority as the spiritual leader and public face of the Catholic Church, there exists a cadre of individuals within the Vatican who wield significant and far-reaching influence without ever ascending to the papal throne. These figures often include senior cardinals, prefects of the most powerful congregations and dicasteries within the Roman Curia, seasoned diplomats, and trusted advisors who have spent decades navigating the intricate corridors of Vatican governance. Their roles are pivotal in shaping church policies, directing doctrinal interpretations, guiding the election of popes, and overseeing the complex day-to-day operations of the Holy See. Though their power may not always be visible to the outside world, it permeates the very fabric of Catholic leadership and decision-making. Some have cultivated extensive networks of loyalty, alliances, and influence, effectively becoming kingmakers whose endorsement or opposition can decisively affect a papal candidacy and the broader direction of the Church. These power brokers function largely behind the scenes, operating in a realm where tradition, theology, politics, and diplomacy converge. They serve as intermediaries and negotiators among often competing factions within the College of Cardinals and beyond, facilitating compromises, resolving conflicts, and helping to maintain institutional stability. Their sway extends to crucial aspects of church governance, such as diplomatic relations with states and other religious bodies, enforcement of doctrine across the global church, and the appointment or removal of bishops and archbishops in dioceses around the world. While the Pope remains the visible and symbolic head of the Church, these individuals ensure the continuity of its administration, the implementation of papal priorities, and the management of Vatican bureaucracy. They are custodians of the Church's institutional memory and wielders of influence that often transcends any single papal reign. Understanding the internal power dynamics of the Vatican requires recognizing that authority is not concentrated solely in the person of the Pope, or even in the College of Cardinals as a whole. Instead, leadership within the Church is multi-layered, involving a complex interplay between formal titles and informal influence. Consensus building, Strategic alliance, formation, and subtle negotiation are often as important as official decrees or hierarchical rank. In this light, the real governance of Catholicism depends as much on these behind-the-scenes figures as on the occupant of St. Peter's chair. Their ability to shape doctrine, influence elections, and steer policy has profound implications for the Church's present trajectory and its future direction. The power beyond the throne is a force that molds Catholicism's global identity and its engagement with an ever-changing world, making the Vatican not just a spiritual center, but a highly intricate political institution where unseen hands guide the faith of millions. Becoming pope is far more than simply winning the votes of one's peers, or stepping into a historic office with centuries of tradition behind it. It involves embracing a multifaceted role that demands a delicate and often precarious balance between spiritual authority, pastoral care, and global leadership. The Pope is not only the supreme teacher of Catholic doctrine, but also a living symbol of unity for more than 1 billion Catholics worldwide, representing a diverse tapestry of cultures, languages, and experiences. He must guide the faithful through complex moral, theological, and social issues that often transcend borders and challenge deeply held beliefs. Beyond theological expertise and personal charisma, the successful pope typically embodies qualities such as profound humility, deep wisdom, and remarkable resilience. These traits enable him to confront entrenched internal church challenges, whether doctrinal disputes, bureaucratic inertia, or scandal sand, to engage diplomatically and empathetically with secular governments, other religious traditions, and global civil society. The choice made by the Conclave therefore reflects far more than a candidate's past accomplishments or ecclesiastical career. It encapsulates the hopes, fears, and needs of the Church at a particular moment in history. The Pope must be able to respond to pressing contemporary issues ranging from human rights and poverty to interreligious dialogue and environmental concerns, while simultaneously preserving the Church's spiritual and doctrinal continuity. This dynamic tension requires a leader who can reconcile tradition with innovation, ensuring that the Church remains rooted in its timeless teachings while engaging meaningfully with a rapidly changing world. A pope's legitimacy rests on a nuanced combination of divine election and human acceptance. While Catholics hold that the Holy Spirit guides the selection process, the new pope's ultimate effectiveness depends on his ability to inspire confidence, loyalty, and respect among both the clergy and the laity. This calls for a delicate balancing act, preserving the sacred traditions and authority of the papacy while demonstrating openness to reform and pastoral sensitivity. Furthermore, a pope must manage the vast administrative machinery of the Vatican, overseeing a complex bureaucracy that spans finance, diplomacy, education, and more, while remaining accessible as a compassionate pastor who listens to the concerns of everyday believers. The demands of the papacy are therefore both immense and multifaceted, combining extraordinary power with profound vulnerability. Understanding what makes a pope truly effective helps illuminate why the Conclave's decision carries such critical weight, not merely for the internal health and direction of the Catholic Church, but for its place and influence in the broader global community. The person elected must navigate a path that unites millions in faith, addresses the ethical challenges of the modern age, and sustains the Church's mission amid diverse and sometimes conflicting pressures. In this sense, the papacy is not just an office of religious leadership, but a pivotal institution at the crossroads of faith, culture, and politics, where spiritual guidance meets the demands of an interconnected and often turbulent world. The Sistine Chapel, with its soaring frescoed ceilings and sacred altars, is far more than just the physical setting of the papal conclave it stands, as a profound symbolic mirror reflecting the Catholic Church's deepest struggles, enduring faith, and far-reaching aspirations. Within the chapel's solemn walls, the cardinals do not face one another merely as individuals. They confront the collective history of Catholicism, its theological triumphs, painful divisions, and ongoing quest for unity. Michelangelo's monumental scenes of creation, the Last Judgment, and salvation loom overhead in vivid, almost overwhelming detail, serving as constant reminders of the immense spiritual weight carried by those tasked with choosing the next pope. The chapel itself embodies a paradox. It is both a testament to the grandeur of divine revelation and a stark symbol of the Church's human frailties, the beauty of its sacred traditions intertwined with the imperfections of those who interpret and uphold them. In this hallowed space, the tension between tradition and change, unity and conflict, faith and worldly politics plays out with profound intensity, making the conclave not just an electoral process, but a deeply spiritual drama. The conclave is therefore a powerful moment of self-reflection for the Church as a whole. It is a rare occasion when the hopes, fears, and uncertainties of Catholicism are projected onto the gathered electors beneath these painted heavens. Every choice made within the chapel's enclosure will ripple through the global Church, shaping its theological direction, pastoral priorities, and engagement with the challenges of the modern world. The silence, the ritual, and the sacred art surrounding the cardinals function as constant reminders of the continuity they inherit and the tremendous responsibility they bear. The Sistine Chapel acts as a sacred theater, a stage where the Church holds a mirror up to itself, acknowledging its rich and complex past, grappling with the realities of its present, and casting a vision for the future. Understanding the conclave in this way helps to explain the profound emotional and spiritual significance the election process holds, not only for those within the Vatican, but for millions of faithful around the world who look to the Church for guidance, hope, and unity. Beyond its immediate religious symbolism, the Sistine Chapel's setting invites the cardinals to reflect on the enduring challenges facing the Church, including reconciling faith with reason, tradition with progress, and unity with diversity. The very act of choosing a pope under these frescoes is laden with meaning. Each stroke of the brush narrates stories of creation, judgment, mercy, and redemption that echo the responsibilities of the electors. The chapel's frescoes are a silent witness to history, underscoring that the conclave is not merely a political event, but a spiritual journey, where divine inspiration and human decision converge. This layered symbolism deepens the emotional intensity experienced by the cardinals and enriches the spiritual atmosphere, reminding them that their task transcends the temporal and touches the eternal. For the faithful worldwide, the conclave setting in the Sistine Chapel embodies the sacred mystery and hope that sustain the Church across generations, a beacon illuminating the path forward amid a complex and changing world. When the white smoke billows from the chimney above the Sistine Chapel, signaling the election of a new pope, it represents a profound moment of both closure and commencement. To the vast crowd gathered in St. Peter's Square and the millions more watching around the globe, it is a symbol charged with hope, renewal, and the guiding presence of divine providence. This iconic image encapsulates the spiritual heartbeat of the Catholic Church, a visible sign that leadership has been chosen to shepherd the faithful through an ever-changing world. Yet, behind this moment of celebration and reverence lies a complex and often messy process, shaped by a delicate interplay of faith, politics, human frailty, and centuries-old traditions. The smoke rising into the Roman sky is not only a symbol of unity and spiritual direction, it also veils the myriad compromises, strategic negotiations, and deep struggles that unfolded behind the conclave's sealed walls. The Church emerges from this process renewed and directed, but the journey to that renewal is rarely straightforward, rarely devoid of tension or imperfection. The true mystery of the conclave lies precisely in this paradoxical blending of sacred ritual and profoundly human decision-making. It serves as a reminder that, while the Church rests on divine principles and the belief in the Holy Spirit's guidance, it is nonetheless led by imperfect men who carry the burdens of history, ambition, doubt, and hope. These men must wrestle with the weight of their responsibility, not only to the Church as an institution, but to the spiritual and temporal needs of over 1 billion souls worldwide. As the newly elected Pope steps forward, he inherits far more than a title or ceremonial power. He assumes the daunting challenge of guiding a global faith community through the complexities of modern life, political upheavals, cultural shifts, ethical debates, and the search for meaning in an increasingly secularized world. The white smoke is thus both a signal to the faithful and a veil that invites believers to trust in the Spirit, even when the human processes and compromises behind that smoke remain unseen and inscrutable. In this sense, the conclave is as much about faith in the unseen as it is about the visible signs that communicate that faith to the world. It calls on the Church and its followers to accept the mystery that divine inspiration can work through flawed human hands and imperfect decisions. As the Church moves forward under new leadership, it carries both the enduring light of tradition and the inevitable shadows cast by human reality imperfections, disagreements, and the persistent challenges of governance and belief. The rising smoke thus becomes a powerful metaphor. It is a signal of new beginnings and hope, yet it also conceals the complexity and imperfection that define the human element within sacred institutions. This duality shapes the ongoing story of the Papacy and the Catholic Church itself, inviting reflection on the nature of faith, leadership, and the delicate balance between the divine and the earthly in one of history's most consequential spiritual ceremonies.